Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about real listening. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is a thinker, and we need to think about it. So, with that being said, thank you so much, Randall, for coming on to my show and helping us thinking about real listening. So, I have to ask you, what does real listening, what does that make you think about?
Well, that's a dissertation length question. Um, it makes me think about frankly, how dreadful we are at listening typically, how we listen to respond, how our heads are busy with noise while we're listening, instead of really dropping in with the intention of really getting what the other person's saying, even under their narrative, what they're really trying to express. So we would lead with curiosity because we really want to get what's going on deep inside over there. That kind of listening rarely happens.
True. That's very true because people don't think on that level. You know what I mean? They're very surface level, very superficial. So when they hear someone speak, they're just listening to certain keywords that will trigger them to respond in whatever way that they're looking for, you know. So I guess my question to you is when did it become real for you that you had to share this knowledge about real listening?
Well, that goes all the way back to childhood, where I would sit with my big family and everybody would be talking over each other and interrupting each other, and nobody was listening. And I felt remarkably alone because nobody was hearing anybody. And then in
Yeah.
high school, for whatever reason, people started coming to my house to talk to me about their issues. So I made my bedroom a little office without even knowing I was doing it. And I started talking to people about their issues. Um,
Wow.
and then later on in life, when I got my PhD, I wrote a dissertation called Empathic Surrender, where I was really trying to explore what happens when we really empathize with someone and we surrender everything like intentions and judgments and all, just receive, just surrender and receive. And I started feeling, oh, I'm being penetrated by the other person's discussion. I'm feeling them in a way I never did. Fast forward another 15 years, and I felt compelled to write the book. So I wrote the book.
Yeah, I like it. I love how it just was engraved in you. You know, like you just was naturally in tune to listening because you've seen an error in your own family. And I myself, I come from a big family and a loud family. And I
Uh,
remember those oh my goodness, holidays. I could just remember just everyone everywhere and just everyone screaming and just laughing and just yelling and just I don't know if they're mad or happy or they're about to fight or if they're about to hug. You know what I mean? Everybody just waits to see and you know what I mean? The intense is there. So it's like as a child, I can absolutely relate to you on that level. And then when you said about just having that empathy, empathy is something that we lack so much in society nowadays. I don't know why it's so hard for us to just come back to our empathetic selves and why that just is completely disconnected where people just don't think they're empathetic at all. Or if they want to have empathy, it has to be in relation to what they're going through specifically, you know? And it's very difficult because they're still so focused, you know,
they're still so focused on.
on on their perspective. You know what I mean? Like whatever they're focused on, because each person is going to be very different depending on their subjective. You know what I mean? Their subjective perspective is going to determine where their focus is. So it's hard to have somebody listen to anybody's point of view and just not have that judgment like you were saying, just taking away that judgment and just listening, because it's funny because people say it's easier to talk to a wall than talk to a human being because though at least the wall is listening, you know, listening, quote unquote. But when you talk to a person, it's like you don't know what to expect all the time. Do you think that's why there's a problem when someone's venting? Like, what is your perspective on venting?
Well, I think it runs the whole gamut. There's different kinds of venting. But when in my office, if a client is venting, I like it. It's because I know anger is usually breaking through some logjam of what's underneath. So I want to support it. Um, but I don't want it just to end venting just for venting's sake. To me, it's an indication again that there's something underneath that's aching for empathy, for reception. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, I want to go after it. That's what's exciting to me is really hearing really what's going on with the other person without my intentions getting in the way.
Yeah, exactly. Without your intentions getting away. So I guess it leads to my next question. How do you separate yourself? You know what I mean? Like, how do you separate your feelings from what you're going through in your own personal life to actually be there for the person that's whoever it is, you know, that's in front of you? Does that
That's
make
a
sense?
yes, it makes perfect sense, and it's a really good question. I feel like I kind of do the opposite.
Oh,
I I don't step out of myself, I step into myself, but it's more of like a meditation where I'm breathing into my belly, I'm feeling my body, and I'm not contracting. I notice when I'm not listening, there's some contraction someplace. I'm tight. When I'm really listening, there's just this easy flow through the system. So if someone says something that triggers me, I don't know, they say they hurt their child, or they hit their child, and I was like, do not hit children. I'll drop back into my body, feel that, why are they hitting their child? And then I can drop in and go, I want to be curious. I don't want to ask, why do you hit your child? I want to ask,
yeah.
all right, so slow this down. Tell me what happened that you would hit your child? Because one is like this, and the other is, all right, I'm still in the curiosity realm. Tell me, help me understand why you would do such a thing.
Yeah, I like that. I like the fact that you don't separate yourself. You go into yourself because you have to recognize your emotions and you have to read your body. And I had another doctor on my show and he was explaining emotions to me and about how they're warning signs, you know what I mean? They help you along the way. And when you stated it, the how, you know, how you develop anger if somebody was going to hit their child and you were to hear that, but you still was able to realize like there's still curiosity, there's more to it, you know what I mean? So let's go dive deeper into that realm. And I think a lot of people are afraid of diving deeper into their emotions, you know. I mean, does that make sense?
Total sense. And I think you're absolutely right again. People are afraid to drop down into their own emotions. They're particularly afraid to drop down into your emotions. You know,
Hmm.
that's why there was a debate club. There was never a listening club. We just weren't practiced or trained to really, really, really listen. That's why I
Yeah.
titled the book Listening in the Raw, because what after thinking about this for decades, I realized the best way for me to listen is to be raw, to not have a millennium sheath over my nerves, to really just be exposed so that you're talking about X, but there's a little hint of something else, and I'm feeling it. And then we can explore that and see if there's some juicy stuff in there. But
Yeah.
if I stayed protected or the authority or something, then it blocks receptivity. Does that
Absolutely. I
make
think
sense?
Oh, that absolutely makes sense because I think of offense, you know what I mean? Because if somebody, you could talk to somebody about a general topic, but they can find offense in what's being said if they're looking for those key points. And instead of, like you said, exploring, diving deeper into it to see where this is going or where this can end up to, then you will never allow yourself to actually get to the end of the rainbow or get to the end of the creek or find out where the river goes. You know what I mean? You never really find out what's really happening because you stop yourself at at the tree. You know what I mean? You stop yourself at the stump. You stop yourself before ever knowing that there's so much more information out there. You know what I mean? That tells people the reason why they acted a certain way or I mean everything's self-explanatory I believe in my mind as long as you allow somebody to talk, you know what I mean? And that's when you're really listening, like you said, when you have that real moment of listening, you can find the answers in the questions that you're already asking within yourself.
Well said.
Does that make sense?
Perfect
Do
sense.
you do that when you have your own therapies?
Yeah, actually, can I tell you a little story?
Oh, please.
First of all, the first chapter in this book is called Filters, and I feel like that's what we're talking about, or
Yeah.
filters we have. It's just like a water filter. It only wants to let in the pure water, none of the things that may hurt. So when I was a little kid, we were driving to my grandmother's house. I was sitting in the middle of my two brothers in the back seat. My mom saw a deer just in the woods,
Okay.
and she pointed it out. And I went, "Oh, isn't that adorable?" And my older brother started teasing me right away. "Ooh, Rand, is it so adorable?" And I remember to this day a steel door shutting closed in my head. Don't ever let that kind of innocent enthusiasm out again. Shut it down. So there's an example of a filter. Like if you feel that feeling, like, oh my goodness, shut it down. This is not a good world for that to come in.
Yes.
Then I noticed later on in life, like middle school and the beginning of high school, when other people were exuberant, I noticed I would have a little like, don't do that. That's stupid. So now I had
Hmm.
a filter inside, don't allow myself to feel it, and a filter outside. I don't think you people should be saying that. It wasn't until in the middle of high school, someplace, where I finally enunciated the word adorable once again. And then I started realizing, oh my God, I shut my whole self down because I got hurt. And that filter has been running the show ever since. So to get back to what you were saying, yeah, I think for us to explore how we got hurt as kids, how we were raised, prejudices, religious thoughts, whatever, how do they filter receptivity?
Yes. Yes. And I think it really goes down to listening within. You know what I mean? That's where it really starts, is that we're listening within. When you are able to listen within your body and recognize why your body's reacting a certain way, why you feel tension in your stomach or in your back or in heaviness on your chest, lumps in your throat. When you start recognizing where that is coming from and associating it with your emotions and your memories in your past, you'll have that recognition like you just had right now when you realize like, oh, I repressed that.
Exactly.
I categorize that as bad. So now that I categorize as bad, everything that comes in that type of like how I see it is also bad as well, and they shouldn't do it as well. So it's
Right.
amazing how we don't listen to ourselves and we don't realize the categories that we put things through. Because I literally had a same moment like that before where I offered my coworker some fruit and she was just like, "Oh, where did you get it from?" And I told her where I got it from, and she was just like, "No, thank you. I don't like that place." And I was just like, "Oh, okay." And I felt rejected. I felt like she rejected me. You know what I mean? And it hurt me, and it hurt my soul, and I felt some type of way. But then I realized like she wasn't rejecting me. You know what I mean? It wasn't about rejecting me. She just didn't like the fruit there. She has the right to not like the fruit there. I just need to remember not to take that personally because it has nothing to do with me. And it took me time to realize that. And it's just crazy because we do this all the time and we make people the bad guy, but in reality it's like we are not listening within ourselves. Does that make sense?
Right. Because we're well, kind of like I'm guessing from what you just said, we're continually protecting ourselves.
Yeah, survival. Hmm.
There's always a presumption it's I'm going to get hurt because I have been so hurt through the years, whatever, especially through childhood,
Yeah.
that as a protector, always vigilant. So
Yeah,
she
very
says,
true.
I don't like fruit. And it's easy to go, oh, that's a raw nerve. I got hit here before, a
Yeah.
rejection or betrayal or who knows what. Yeah, those filters are hard to identify sometimes and harder to just quiet down so we can really listen.
Yes, that's the word. Ladies and gentlemen, quiet down. Oh my goodness. That is something that we lack in our day to day, and that is something that I'm striving for in my day to day is just to learn how to quiet down and not to have music, not to have TV, not to have any noise, but to listen to my surroundings and to listen to the now of the moment. And people don't realize like when you start to listen to the now of the moment, you start to feel centered, you start to feel peace, and in such a way that I recognize every little creaking noise in my neighborhood, in my house. You know what I mean? I know when my boys are moving in my bed, when they're upstairs, like I know everything because I'm learning how to quiet down my soul. So I think my next question for you is, how do you learn to develop this skill to be more intentional with your listening?
That's also a really good question.
See, I'm
I
bringing
think,
out the good questions to make you think.
Dang. um, frankly, I think I was kind of born with it. Um, I think the reason why I wasn't interrupting everybody in my family of origin is because I was born with this feeling of isolation or aloneness when people were talking over each other. So I think I write about this a little bit in the book. When I was a young teenager, I was judging my family. Why doesn't anybody ask a question? Why doesn't anybody look into each other's eyes and really develop a conversation?
Yeah.
Later on, I learned that that judgment was another filter. Because if I could judge them as being wrong and me being right, I don't feel so hurt.
Yeah.
But as I looked into it more deeply, I was judging them so I wouldn't feel the aloneness. And when I started to really allow myself to feel that aloneness, a whole world opened up for me of, wait a minute, I'm not the only one who's alone.
Yeah.
Just people cover it up a little better than I do.
Yes.
They are really intrigued about, so if I'm feeling alone and they're feeling alone, what's missing? Listening.
Yes.
No one's asking us questions about, so wait, you just said that thing. How come? Well, what was going on for you? And really pursue it with genuine curiosity until, like I said before, you have almost a felt experience of what they're trying to tell you.
Yeah. It's that genuineness, goodness, I couldn't say that word. That genuineness, curiosity, I think people have lacked because people are, they have so many filters and people have been hurt so many times that it's hard to really break through the core of certain people sometimes. But it's like we have to remember if it starts with you, then and if you start working on your core, your shield, all of your layers and your walls, when you start breaking them down and you start listening within and why you have those walls, then it allows you to understand why other people have those walls as well. And then you
That's right.
no longer have that judgment that you were talking about that I love so much that you brought up because that is something that I did growing up as well. I was like, and it taught me how to learn from their bad habits and their mistakes, so it's a give and take. But then it also gives me that compassion, that understanding that a lot of people don't have, and what I realized that when people have understanding, they still have a choice. You know what I mean? They still have a choice to choose that empathetic compassion route. Like, I understand why you do what you do, or they can choose to have that resentment. But that's a choice. You know what I mean? That's choice that people need to acknowledge. That's not a direction that you have to fall into once you have the understanding, but that's a choice that you have to acknowledge that you're choosing, because in the end of the day, you can choose to have compassion as well. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the problem is most folks aren't even aware of that there's a choice.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
on automatic pilot.
That's
You
true.
say something about, I don't know, sadness. And I go, oh, I was sad once. And blah, 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 blah. Because we're not even conscious of, wait a minute, but that's curious. Mitzi, why were you sad? Tell me about that.
Hmm.
That we don't go for it. And you remind me, even we have to be careful with the word empathy because therapists, we're taught how to empathize. And there's a series of techniques, reflective listening, acknowledging all this stuff, which I think is very helpful and necessary for people to learn. But it can become a technique oriented empathy, not a real, oh, I really want to feel what it's like for you. I'm reading you and then giving you the appropriate empathic technique because that's what I'm supposed to do. And I think, no, that's not listening. That's not listening in the raw anyway. It's
Exactly.
halfway measure. Do you really want to feel what it's like for the other?
Exactly. Do you really want to put yourself in that person's shoes? And usually the answer is no, because people don't want to feel what you're feeling. People don't want to cry the tears that you cry. They don't want to put themselves on that level because they have protected themselves so much and they're in this little bubble themselves that they only allow themselves to have this empathetic technique. So when you say that, it makes perfect sense because I know a lot of people and they are literally to that point, you know what I mean, where it's just like their empathy goes as far as their hand goes. You know what I mean? They can only see as far as their hand goes, or they can only empathize as far as that goes. So it's very difficult because when you are willing to break down your walls and be vulnerable, you know what I mean? You have to accept the fact that you'll be hurt because you'll be misunderstood. You know what I mean? Because I think misunderstandings is something that we have to accept when you are expressing yourself in your most honest form. Is that right?
Perfectly said, and use the magic word vulnerability. To me, that's what I'm most curious about. Because
Yeah.
in the landscape of vulnerability, the defenses are minimal, the protections are minimal. We're just dropping into what's really true. Talk about being genuine, like you said earlier. And
Yeah.
when I'm with somebody, a child, one of my children, a client, what my partner, and they start to open up to vulnerability, I am enthralled. I want to know, what is it like over there?
I know, me too. It is amazing because it's like, okay, you can see the walls fall and you can see their realness come out. And it's
Yes.
just like when somebody's realness comes out and they're just you can see the inner child. You know what I mean? You can see the joy come back, the peace comes back. And as soon as you know you recognize that their shield goes up is because when somebody else comes in the room or somebody else comes around and that shield goes right up and their eyes change, their spirit change, their posture change, everything changes about them because they got in full defense mode. And I just wish people would realize, because this is something I had to realize, that vulnerability is such a beautiful thing in its rawest form, that it builds actually more confidence. And it's just, it's like, I don't know what it is, but for me, I've learned to flip the switch because I had for the longest time thinking that vulnerability was weakness. So I would be confident in my arrogance, in my ignorance. You know what I mean? And then I seen somebody be vulnerable in their ignorance. And I was just like, wow, look at you. And then that's when I was like, I want to be like that. Because I seen it in such a way that people were like, oh, I'll help you. Oh, let me provide you the information that you don't know. Let me help you. And I
Yes.
realized I don't know so much that I am better off admitting the fact that I don't know than acting like I do know and ruin the whole entire experience for myself or for somebody else. You know what I mean? So
That's,
I think that's something that I wish other people will learn because it took a long time for me to learn that.
I love what you're saying. And in the book, again, I talk about, if you want to listen in the raw, then you have to be very comfortable in the unknown.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we think we know something, there's a contraction.
Yeah.
Then is the problem with therapy too. Label someone a narcissist or whatever. Now they're in a box. And you've got to work
Exactly.
now to open up that box to really hear them. So I think it's really super important to meditate, kind of like what you've been indicating, where you can be talking to me and I'm listening, and I don't need to know what you're saying yet. I can sit comfortably in the unknown, take good breaths, knowing that if we keep on following, pursuing, what is it? What's the thing? What did your mom say? That unknown is going to fill up with yummy information, real, genuine, vulnerable, personal information. To not foreclose the unknown too quickly, to let it really sit there and feed the conversation.
Yeah.
That takes courage.
Yes.
People don't like
Absolutely.
being unknown.
They really don't. They think it's a really fearful place because it's like you don't know what's going to happen in there. You know what I mean? You never know what's going to happen in the unknown. And I love that you have this in your book, that you have these great details of how listening is impacted by all of that. You know what I mean? By vulnerability, about being judgmental, about recognizing your past, about recognizing everything around you, and really just taking that moment of of silence. I mean, just this whole entire conversation just made me realize that yes, I am taking the right steps in my journey to really be listening because it got into the point in my life where I would look somebody in the face. They would talk to me and I would hear absolutely nothing, nothing,
Thank you.
nothing. Oh my goodness. It was terrible where I was just like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. So that's when I went on my journey to real listening. And then that's when I started this podcast because it
Really?
literally forced me, yeah, it forced me to start listening. And man, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for this journey and this opportunity because I get to speak to people like yourself and it has evolved me in such a way that I am just eager to see what next can I get. You know what I mean? What next can I learn? Because in my mind, I'm now a forever student. And I wish more people can have that type of mindset as just being a forever student, no matter your age. Doesn't matter if you're in an actual school or not. Just be a forever student in the world of life because life is willing to teach you so much. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
that's what I love. And it sucks because time is catching up to us. So, but what can be some lasting words of wisdom that you can leave us off with so that we can keep on thinking?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. To me, when you said inner child, what I thought of was what I call innocence.
Mm,
And to me, we're programmed so much to perform, to put out there into the world. And what you were just talking about was working on receptivity. It's almost the opposite, to receive. And we're not skilled at that. And what you made me think of was, in terms of innocence, my analogy for that is if you have a, I don't know, 9 month old, 12-month old child, and you give them steamed broccoli, they know right away, no, thank you. They're spitting it out. 2 minutes later, you give them ice cream, and a minute after that, they're wearing it. They want it so much. So the inner child, or what I call innocence, that part of us knows exactly what's right for us and what's not right for us. It's not a debate. But we've had to protect ourselves so much over time that we lose connection with that intuitive, that whispering voice that says, no, no, I don't think so. No, thank you. Or, yes, let's go. It becomes muted. So as much as people can drop into the quiet and start to really listen to ourselves, the way you and I are now talking about listening to others, we have a very different relationship with self too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, oh my goodness. Goodness gracious. This was such a great conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Randall, for coming onto my show and sharing your perspective. And ladies and gentlemen, if you guys want to know more about Dr. Randall, because how could you not after this conversation, right? How could you not? Please go check out his book. I have access to his website that has access to all of the great things that he has to offer the world. So with that being said, always, always, always keep thinking, y'all. Bye.